welcome to the Tough Cover Podcast, episode 11 on the Painted Lines with your host, Mark Henry Jr., the 11th ever edition and a very special edition at that, live on the Painted Lines on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. I want you guys to go follow at the Painted Lines on Twitter, subscribe to the Painted Lines on YouTube and Twitch, and please go follow me at Mark Henry Jr. _ on Twitter and at Tough Cover Pod on Twitter and Instagram. The Painted Lines is now sponsored by XL Media, so there will be more to come on info regarding that and some deals for you guys. So keep it locked to the Painted Lines on Twitter and keep it locked to my Twitter and at Tough Cover Pod, and you'll be up to date and notified on everything that is to come with our sponsorship with XL Media. Please leave your picks or bracket thoughts or Final Fours or anything you want in the comments, and I will let you know my thoughts. We'll be doing a contest soon involving you guys with the bracket, with the Daily Dose or with TPL. We haven't fully ironed that out yet, but we will be doing a bracket challenge, and we will keep you updated on that. But for the meantime, please leave as many picks in the comments for tonight for the NBA or the NHL or soccer, or if you want to talk about the bracket I'm going through or any other bracket-related questions or picks or comments, please leave as many as your heart desires in the comments. Please go check out me, Dylan Davis, and Matt McGinty's Selection Sunday watch party. We were right on Barstool and Titus and Tate's ass in terms of views. So I thank you guys for putting that up in the thousands in terms of views. We had a blast, and I can't wait to do more with those guys. And you can check them out on the Daily Dose and the Faithful Fanatics podcast, and their ads are in the YouTube description. Go check them out. I'll be going on the Daily Dose on Wednesday, I believe. So check it out. A little breakdown of this week on the Tough Cover podcast. We're going to go region by region each day at 5 right here. And then on Thursday, I will do the last region and show my full bracket or sheet of integrity, as Greeny used to call it in the prime of Mike and Mike on Friday morning. Probably at 8 a.m., I will break down every single game from a spread and a total standpoint for a gambling perspective. I will be talking about gambling lines as I go through each bracket for the first round games in each region, but it won't be the main focus of my conversation like it will be on Friday and Saturday. So then ditto Saturday morning around 8 a.m. Before we get to my West region breakdown, let's do a fit check. I've got Wichita State on my shirt because they made the bracket. They made the tourney in spite of Joe Lunardi having Louisville in over them. Louisville did not make it. Kentucky, they had a Kentucky AD who was heading up the committee. So a lot of Louisville fans are not happy, but I think Louisville's resume was trash anyway. Hey, Joe Lunardi, I know you're a Philly guy, but you don't want to go to war with the Shockers. Don't start no stuff, won't be no stuff. Joe, you should have put them in, but it's okay. I won't go crazy on you. As a bracketologist myself, I understand. I had Oklahoma State as a 2 seed. They ended up as a 4 seed. So we all get some stuff wrong. Behind me for the fit check, I got Luka and Ja, because even though I'm not betting on the NBA tonight, I'll be watching Grizzlies Suns and Clippers Mavs, rooting my draft children on and watching some fun basketball because those are two great matchups in the NBA as I break down the stats for the bracket that I'm doing tomorrow's pod. All right, so we made it through our intros. So Marky Bracketology here to take you through the West region, or as I call it, the Gonzaga region. So let's bring it out, and let's start out with the 16 seed play-in games. You got Norfolk State and Appalachian State. You can't get too excited about this game if you're either of these teams or the fan bases or anything, or these schools, because you're playing for the right, as Matt McGinty said, to get blown out by Gonzaga by like 40. 1 seeds are 139-1. The play-in 16 seed games winners have never won. So I just don't see that streak breaking here with Gonzaga. So I won't waste too much time with Gonzaga. They're 26-0 with a plus 23 point differential with a number 1 BPI. Gonzaga is legit. We will discuss more as we go along. So let's go and advance them forward right here. And then we move on to the 8-9 matchup. I think in terms of this bracket in general, and I feel like this is a general bracket concept year to year, I think you find more value in terms of in-game betting opportunities and one singular game betting opportunities live in these 8-9 and 7-10 matchups because these teams are relatively close and styles make fights. So if you have a strong opinion about one team over the other in these 8-9, 7-10 games, usually the lines are pretty close. So I think there's the most opportunity to make money on 8-9 and 7-10 games, sometimes 6-11. But I think the 6 seeds are a bit stronger this year, as we'll get to. So let's talk 8-9 here. We got Oklahoma, Missouri. Missouri is a 2-point dog. The over-under is 141. I'm not huge on either of these teams at all. Both teams really started strong and finished really weak. So kind of makes sense to see them matched up with each other in an 8-9 matchup here. It just feels like Mizzou has more dudes and should absolutely dominate OU in the paint. I think Mizzou going 3-5 to close the year doesn't give me as much concern as Oklahoma finishing 0-4 and losing their last 4 games that they played. These teams are so similar. It's crazy, but a theme of mine, I know that they're playing a Big 12 team here, is going to be respecting the SEC. I think the SEC got disrespected in general here. So I think Drew Smith, Pinson, Tillman, when they're all together on the floor, they've won most of their games. I think they'll be too much for Reeves and Manic. Public will love the Sooners, in my opinion. I think everyone's going to pick Oklahoma in this 8-9 matchup, but I'll go with the Mizzou Tigers. Not too much conviction on that pick, but I'll take Missouri to win the game, and I'm sure I'll be on Missouri +2. Kevin Cronin says hi. What's up, Kevin Cronin? Shouts out. You're always in here in the comments. Thanks for joining us. So in this 5-12 matchup, we got Creighton as the 5 seed against UC Santa Barbara as the 12 seed. This is a 7-point spread favored by Creighton with a total at 139.5. This is a really tough game to pick. Probably one of the 2 toughest games in this region entirely for me to pick. Part of me really wants to pick the UC Santa Barbara Gauchos, but they haven't played any top 75 net teams. It's just impossible to judge this team based on their resume. They really haven't played anyone that you can compare to Creighton. Creighton relies on the 3 so heavily, and specifically Marcus Zagorowski so much that they are a prime 5-12 candidate for an upset. But I think they pull it out in a tight game here. So I'll go a little bit chalk, and I'll take Creighton as the 5. Moving on to my next game here, which is 4 Virginia versus 13 Ohio. It's impossible to talk about this game without mentioning that Virginia has major COVID issues. They pulled out of the ACC tourney. Jeff Goodman said that Virginia won't be traveling until Friday for a Saturday game due to COVID protocol. So Ohio is starting to feel like a really public pick. I know some people were already hitting me up asking me about this pick. So I think Ohio is going to be a very, very, very popular upset pick. Jason Preston for Ohio has been an awesome point guard. Could give UVA a ton of problems if he tries to up the tempo and make it a high-scoring game. I've liked UVA to make a run all year long. This COVID pause is giving me pause, but if anyone can handle it, it's Tony Bennett. I'll take UVA to win, but Ohio could be a hell of a value at +9 here. UVA plays close, low-scoring games. 9 is a lot of points. So is 132 for the total here. So moving on to the next game, let's bring it down a little bit on this region to the bottom half of the bracket. We can't see that bottom part, of course, but let's talk about the 11 first 4 matchup between Wichita State and Drake. Everyone knows I love both Wichita and Drake, but especially Wichita, as I have them on my shirt right here. But USC is an absolutely tough matchup for whoever comes out of that game. I really am not necessarily sure. I'm really not necessarily sure who's going to come out. My guess would be Wichita State. I would go with the Wichita State Shockers to beat Drake. I know they're -2. I think that's a fair line. They should be slightly favored due to Drake's injuries and Drake being a little bit different of a team down the stretch. I obviously love Wichita State, so I'm a little biased here. But I think Wichita State takes Drake down. But I think the run ends against USC because I think USC is an absolute sleeper for a 6 seed. I love their draw here. I think Wichita is a really bad matchup. Or I should say it's a good matchup for USC. It's a bad matchup for Wichita. Evan Mobley will just outmatch the Shockers. The Shockers don't have the bigs to compete. There's no lines on USC Wichita or USC Drake, obviously. But I do think it'll be a fun game. I can't wait to watch. Wichita State will hang around, but USC will take care of business and advance on to the next round. So let's move on USC to the second round. And then moving on to the 3-14 matchup, which is number 3 Kansas, the Jayhawks, versus the number 14 Eastern Washington Eagles. The Eastern Washington Eagles are an 11-point underdog and the over-under is 142.5. Kansas has been so up and down, but their defense has been great all year. The COVID pause that kicked them out of the Big 12 tournament gives me a lot of worry, and they got a tough draw for a 14 seed here with Eastern Washington, our Rico Bosco favorite. Shout out to the Barstool Bench Mob. Eastern Washington shoots the lights out of the building. They only really played Oregon and got killed, but that was so early. I don't really think it's a fair. You can't really judge them based on that early game before Christmas. Kansas should move on, but it will be close, and I'm not especially confident given the COVID pause. So let's move Kansas Jayhawks on to the second round. And let's go to this bottom little region. In the 7-10 and the 2-15, we move on and talk about the number 7 Oregon versus the number 10 VCU. This is a big spread for a 7-10 game. Oregon is a 6-point favorite. These are two teams I don't really love, who I think are a little bit both overseeded, to be honest. Both resumes suck. But VCU should not have made the tourney, let alone had a bye. I think VCU and Utah State were the two luckiest teams that really shouldn't have gotten in where they got. But Oregon is better than their resume says. I'm not so sure VCU is. Oregon is an old, experienced team that can shoot the three ball. Coach Dana Altman is great, especially in March. So I'll go with Oregon here. Chris Duarte and Eugene Umaroye both average about 16 or 17 points per game, and 5 players on the Ducks average double figures. VCU only has one dude who can really score in double figures consistently, and only another dude who averages 11. So they really only have 2 people in double figures. I think this is a great draw for Oregon, and I'm extremely confident that they move on. I'm actually more confident in Oregon than I am a lot of these other higher seeded teams in this region. I think Oregon will move on, even though I'm not exactly in love with Oregon as a team or program. So let's move on to the 2-15 matchup here with Iowa and Grand Canyon. Shout out Dylan. I know I almost talked him into Grand Canyon last night. Grand Canyon I got them at a 15.5 point underdog. It's since moved to 14 points. The over-under is 144.5. I think Grand Canyon this is a hot take. I think they're the best 13, 14, 15, or 16 seed in the tourney. So I guess that bottom, quick math here, but that bottom 18 teams, I'll take Grand Canyon over any of those other 17 teams. This is a really tough draw for them because Iowa shoots the absolute lights out. If Grand Canyon matched up with a Houston or a Kansas, or maybe even Ohio State, I would put my nuts on the table and take the Antelopes. But I think Iowa just has too many shooters and will pull out a close one. However, as Stephen A. Smith would say, Grand Canyon covers 15.5. In fact, it was one of the 5 bets I've locked in so far. I've only locked in 5. Grand Canyon has not lost by 11 plus this year. So I love Grand Canyon plus 15.5 against Iowa. I think Iowa wins a 5-point game. I think it's going to be really close, so that probably benefits the over. So I would go Grand Canyon plus 15.5, and I probably will end up playing the over as well. So I think that's going to be a really fun game right there, but I don't exactly have the cojones to take Grand Canyon. So let's move on to this matchup up here. We got Gonzaga and Missouri. I didn't move Virginia on. Let's zoom in a little bit for you guys so you can see. We're on to the second round. So we're on to Sunday and Monday's games. We got Gonzaga versus Missouri, and we've got Creighton versus Virginia. In the 1-9 matchup, Gonzaga versus Missouri, Mizzou has a win against the top 3 in the SEC, who I respect, and that's why I put them past OU, and they're no pushover. But they might as well be with Gonzaga. Mizzou only has a plus 1.7 point differential, as Gonzaga has plus, what was that stat, plus 23? Yeah. Plus 23 point differential. It's such a massive difference. I get that they play in the WCC and Mizzou plays it in what is my opinion an underrated SEC. But with that difference in point differential, this could get ugly, even including their non-conference games. Gonzaga rolls here. Sorry, Mizzou. At least you got one win. So we move Gonzaga forward. And we move on to Creighton versus Virginia. Again, the COVID pause gives me pause, but I think this is a great matchup for Virginia, just talking basketball-wise. Virginia struggles with bigs, and Creighton can't take advantage of that struggle. Virginia defends the three very well, and as I said, in the Creighton-UC Santa Barbara matchup, Creighton is way too reliant on the three. I expect this to be a low-scoring affair, which favors UVA, who forces their pace on the Blue Jays in this game. I'll go with Virginia to move on to the Sweet 16 in a fun matchup with Gonzaga there. So let's move on to the bottom half of this bracket. We've got number 3 Kansas versus number 6 USC, and I think this is my first big upset of this bracket. I think this is a perfect matchup for Evan Mobley and the USC Trojans. I love this upset, and I honestly don't think it will be a big line. I think it'll only be like a 4-point line for Kansas, depending on how the first games go for both of these teams. USC has a higher BPI and has a better KenPom. Kansas wants to slow games down, but USC's rebounding and shot blockers will lead the way and put the Trojans on top of the Jayhawks. Kansas has a bunch of dudes. I just don't know if they have a guy. USC has a top 3 to 5 guy in the entire full shebang. Evan Mobley leads USC to the Sweet 16. Number 2, Iowa versus number 7, Oregon. As someone who thinks Iowa is extremely vulnerable against athleticism, I kind of think Oregon is a good matchup for Iowa. This is a tough game. This is the toughest game for me to pick in the whole bracket, but Oregon just isn't long and athletic enough to take advantage of what Iowa can't do well. Just like I said with Grand Canyon in the first game, everyone will get on the Oregon to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 bandwagon because of Rothstein. I know he's big on Oregon, John Rothstein, and because they're 11-2 in their last 13 games. But one of those 2 losses was an absolute blowout at home to USC. Iowa has a big in Garza that will absolutely eat like Evan Mobley did against Oregon, and they will win this game, but I do think it'll be a close one, going with Iowa. So we move up to the top part of the region, and you've got Gonzaga and Virginia. Let's bring it out a little bit here. We got the Sweet 16 playing for Elite 8 bids. Number 1 Gonzaga versus number 4 Virginia, and let me just say, what a draw for Gonzaga. They beat their 2, 3, and 4 seeds by an average of over 17 per game, like Matt McGinty said on the stream last night. They beat Virginia by 23. If UVA was coming off of an ACC tourney win, or maybe just not even a COVID pause, maybe I'd think a little bit harder here. This is Gonzaga's dream scenario and a perfect path onto the Elite 8 for the Zags as the defending champ Virginia Cavaliers go down. So let's move on to the bottom Sweet 16 matchup with number 2 Iowa versus number 6 USC. Do you remember when I said Oregon didn't quite have the athleticism, Grand Canyon didn't quite have the athleticism or the resume to beat Iowa's? Guess who does? The USC Trojans, who I hate, by the way, as a Notre Dame guy. So for me to give USC as much credit as I am and as I have, and it's crazy and it hurts me. But you got to know that it comes from a place of truth. You got to know that I'm just calling it how I see it here. I can't stand USC. I hate them as a program. I hate their football team. I hate their basketball team. I hate their colors. I hate the Trojans. I hate everything about them. But this team is going to the Elite 8. I can't believe I'm saying it. But I just think people are undervaluing USC. 3 of their 6 losses are all to Colorado, who they just match up very poorly with due to point guard play. USC does not have a great defensive point guard. And we've seen Luka Garza, going back to the matchup with Iowa here, we've seen Luka Garza struggle with Travion Williams. We've seen him really struggle with Kofi Coburn and other athletic bigs. Enter Evan Mobley. I think Evan Mobley is the worst possible matchup for Luka Garza, which makes USC the worst possible matchup for the Iowa Hawkeyes. So we're advancing the USC Trojans onto the Elite 8. And that brings us to our last game of the region here. We got the Elite 8 with a trip to the Final Four on the line. The number 1 seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs versus the number 6 seeded USC Trojans. This is the toughest matchup Gonzaga can face in the West region, in my opinion. I think USC is the second best team in this region. I know that might sound crazy. I would have probably said Virginia a couple of weeks ago, but I just don't think Virginia matches up with Gonzaga whatsoever. And I don't think that after the COVID pause, I think that really, really kills any momentum Virginia was trying to build at the end of the season. So this is this is a tough matchup, like I said, but this is where the superstar-making run of Evan Mobley ends in a matchup with his competition for the number 2 pick in Jalen Suggs. But Suggs has Corey Kispert and countless other contributors, where USC is a little too reliant on their bigs, and specifically Evan Mobley, as opposed to Gonzaga, who has showed just how many ways they can win and just how many players can step up and be their best guy for a night or for a week. It is incredible. One of the best teams and resumes I've ever seen in college basketball has been this Gonzaga Bulldogs team, and this is by far the best team Mark Few has had to coach at Gonzaga. So Gonzaga and Mark Few move on to the Final Four, and we complete our West region with Gonzaga as the West Regional Champion, moving on to the Final Four to play the East Regional Champion. And that is the region we'll be going over tomorrow, the East region, which is, by the way, I know I went a little bit chalk. I know I had a 6 seed in the Elite Eight, so it's not all that chalk. I know I went a little bit chalk picking my bracket there, but tomorrow will be whatever the opposite of chalk is. It'll be havoc. It'll be chaos. It is an absolutely crazy field down there in the East region. But let me do a little West region rundown here. My pick is obviously the number 1 seed, Gonzaga Bulldogs. My Final Four dark horse is the number 6 seed, USC Trojans. My 13, 14, 15, or 16 seed, most likely to make a run, is the number 15 seed, Grand Canyon Antelopes. The player of the region is Jalen Suggs. That's probably the toughest decision in terms of any of these regions, the player of the region, because Jalen Suggs and Evan Mobley are going back and forth on who's going to be the number 2 pick. I'll prefer Jalen Suggs just by a hair. And the toughest game to pick, like I said, was number 2 seed Iowa versus number 7 seed Oregon. But when we get to some of these other regions, there are such tougher games to pick than that. It's going to be crazy. So please join us for the rest of the week. Thanks for joining us today, and join us the next 3 days as I break down each region day by day at 5 live on TPL. And join us on Friday and Saturday early in the morning at 8 a.m. Follow at the Painted Lines on Twitter and subscribe on YouTube and Twitch. Again, I said it at the top of the show, but we are now sponsored by XL Media. There will be more info regarding that, so please keep it locked to at the Painted Lines on Twitter, and follow me on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _ and follow the at Tough Cover Pod on Twitter and Instagram. We will keep you updated and notified and up to date. We will have a bracket challenge. We'll tweet that out. I'll keep you guys in the loop. So everyone who's a part of the Tough Cover Click, please leave some more comments going forward this week about your bracket thoughts. I would love to hear some of your guys' picks and your thoughts, your Final Fours, your champions, whatever that may be. So thanks for joining us to everyone who did, and enjoy the brackets.